Hey, Deb.
Hi, Annabel. It's nice to talk to you again.
Great talking to you. So, how is the world of tracking disinformation lately?
Active. It's it's very, very busy. There is a tremendous amount of disinformation out there, and misinformation and spin, and it all blends together and makes it hard for people to know who they should trust, what's real, what's not real. And we're just trying to make it a little bit easier for people.
Yeah.
Really, if you are not confused right now, it's because you're just not really online.
Yeah. So, what's the craziest? Let's start with some of the craziest things that are being circulated right now, swirling around us.
Well, there's a lot of competition for that right now.
Mhm.
There's, you know, there are a lot of different actors in the disinformation space. Some are more effective and more aggressive than others. QAnon is obviously a big one. And they have stories about how the Osama bin Laden raid wasn't real. Those are the kinds of things that are really way out on the fringe, even though they're being repeated by very mainstream characters. They're really very much, there's no reason to pay attention to those sorts of things, even though they get a lot of oxygen from famous people.
Mhm.
The story of the moment, of course, is one that was treated really in a very unique and interesting way by both Facebook and Twitter, which
Mhm.
both platforms disallow sharing and linking to the story that was published in the New York Post. In it, Rudy Giuliani claims to have found Hunter Biden's, or was given a copy of Hunter Biden's laptop hard
Yes.
drive.
Yeah. Yeah.
This story is
That
really suspect, right?
it's bonkers.
It's not only is it crazy, there's it's just a really sketch story. Nothing about it holds up. The details have been changing by the hour. Giuliani keeps changing his story. Supposedly, emails were found on this laptop that no one has proof it belongs to anyone in particular. These so-called emails that supposedly have explosive information that speak to imagined corruption. There's a lot of things wrong with it. One is that it's been known for a long time that Giuliani's been chasing, hanging out with agents of Russian disinformation, searching for this information. It's very likely this, whatever information came there is coming from those sources. The emails that have been shown, or they posted photographs of, on further analysis, the metadata on these files doesn't make any sense relative to the story that they're telling about it.
Mhm.
It's really full of holes.
Yeah. So, okay. So all these things that are swirling around, they're definitely aimed at trying to influence the election, right? I mean, we're not crazy to make that connection, right?
Right. Most of what's going on now, well, there's three types of different
Mhm.
disinformation floating around right now. Foreign actors mostly want to cause chaos. They
Mhm.
want the chaos. They want people freaking out. They want people not trusting one another. They want people really angry. And that's partly about the election, but it's partly just to create, put the United States in a very vulnerable position, where we can't act from a position of strength if we don't have faith in the government, if news organizations aren't trusted, all that sort of thing. So they want to cause chaos and dissent. Domestic actors are primarily focused on the election. Well, I may have oversimplified that a little bit. Part of Russia's thing is that they think that it is clear that they think that denigrating Biden helps create chaos and helps Trump, who they see as an agent of chaos as well.
So when you say foreign actors, you're talking about Russian, or are there other countries besides Russia trying to?
So there's certainly a lot of different players in the game. China, whose disinformation strategy used to be primarily focused domestically. So China would put out a lot of disinformation in order to manipulate the media narrative to its own people, has turned that outward now and has started trying to influence opinion and outcomes in other countries, including ours. Iran is certainly in the game. There are several others, but by far the very most active and the very most sophisticated right now and the very most aggressive is really Russia. FBI Director Wray gave testimony just a couple of weeks ago reaffirming that. And all the intelligence agencies have doubled down and reaffirmed that.
Yeah. So, okay, so I cannot keep up with all these conspiracy theories, but
yeah, you
the
shouldn't
one,
try.
yeah, no, it's definitely not healthy. But the one that is really crazy to me is the Bin Laden is alive theory that's emerged.
Yeah, it seems that conspiracy theorists really like this idea that figures that we think are dead are alive. So Elvis is dead, John F. Kennedy is dead, and Osama bin Laden is dead. These conspiracy theories, particularly the ones that are driven by Q, and Q sort of the unified field theory of all conspiracy theories. They're sort of the singularity of conspiracies. They have a very specific way that they are trying to recruit people into their bizarre little world. And once you believe any kind of disinformation, they know that you are likely, or conspiracy theory or bizarre, counterfactual, whatever, they know that they are likely to be able to rope you into more and more and more. They do it in a really clever way that makes people feel like they're in the know and that they're special and that they're chosen and that they're privy to special information. And that makes them very powerful and effective. YouTube, by the way, today took down a lot of the largest QAnon accounts. A lot of people are very upset about this, but YouTube was actually one of the most effective online radicalization tools for these guys, as it was in terms of online radicalization for other sorts of organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS prior to that. So, what we've been doing is to create these little rumor reality cards. You've seen these before, right?
Yeah, do you want to do a screen share and show us some of your reality cards?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is our website. And what we do is look at, we don't try to chase every piece of disinformation because we're not really equipped for that. you'd kind of go insane. And we're not really trying to help people who are, already sort of deeply indoctrinated into some of these conspiracy theories. They're not the people we're trying to help. But the vast majority of people are confused at least some of the time about some of the things, right? Because it's a very confusing world out here. So what we've done is when we see a theme or a specific piece of disinformation or a theme start to emerge that seems like it's really breaking into the mainstream, and we're starting to see people not really know whether it's true or not, take the idea of herd immunity, right? So we've heard a lot of people talk about herd immunity for the coronavirus. People saying that, these lockdowns are really destructive. They're making people depressed. They're depressing the economy. They are keeping kids out of school. And so we should just open up everything and create herd immunity. And of course, it is true that these lockdowns are not great and they are causing harm in a lot of real ways to a lot of real people. However, the idea that herd immunity is just going to happen is also not real, right? So herd immunity, the whole concept of herd immunity actually came from the world of vaccines. So for example, with the measles, herd immunity is when you have enough of the population vaccinated so that that small portion of the population that for whatever reasons, usually health issues, they can't get the vaccine because they're immunocompromised or whatever, they are still protected because you have herd immunity. Herd immunity without a vaccine, with any kind of serious illness, is not that common or easy to achieve. So what we do is we say, okay, this concept's getting really a lot of noise and it's very complicated and people are confused. So we go out and we look at the research. In this case, we actually tracked down a couple of epidemiologists and virologists and said, so can you explain this to us so that we can understand it really well? And then, we summarize it in a paragraph worth of text. And we show our references so that you can see where we get our information. We try to use the most credible sources we can find. And we have a page on our site about what a credible source is. And we share these on, our Facebook page, the Reality Team Facebook page, and other social media sites. And our goal is, we have a couple of goals really. One is to just make it a little bit easier to be able to tell what's real and what's fake when it gets really noisy, and really any reasonable person is likely to get confused. And the other is, the people who are pushing disinformation, they push it really hard. Part of the reason that it's so effective is that it's super repetitive. It completely saturates the information environment. So we want to, take some of that room back and say, hey, let's change the ratio of reliable to unreliable information and see what we can do there. So we've got these cards. We've got some on mask mandates, right? Is it legal? Can you tell me that I have to wear a mask? And in fact, you can. So governments can tell you that you have to wear a mask when in special situations like this, where there's a pandemic and it's warranted. Businesses can tell you have to wear a mask. They can tell you have to wear shirt and shoes. They can tell you have to wear a mask. So those sorts of things. Are there any sort of?
Yeah, I just share the link to your cards, like the key issues, and the one that really jumps out at me is
I can't see the chat right now.
Okay, so the one that really jumps out at me on your website is, are militias legal?
Oh yeah,
do they
here.
have any authority? Like that really jumps out at me. I would love to talk to you about that, because it says, rumor, private militias are protected by the Constitution. Reality, mobs are not militias. Okay.
So this is a really interesting issue because, you know, I'm having trouble with my own computer here. I'm in full screen mode and I can't get out of it, so I can't share my screen. What's going on?
Okay. Well, I can share that if you want. Okay.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and share it? So
yes.
The question here is, you know, we've all heard about militias, particularly because there's a lot of conversation about the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment has that word militia in it. We've heard the words also because of, you know, what was going on in Michigan with Governor Whitman, and some people involved in a criminal conspiracy to cause harm to her. It came up in the Kenosha shooting. So we wanted to know, so it's a little confusing, right? We know that militias are a thing, but are they a legal thing, and what makes them legal, right? It's a very reasonable question to ask and a very reasonable thing to be confused about. So what we found is actually Georgetown Law School published this really interesting asset that goes through the very specific laws in every state on militias. And at the top of every single one of them is sort of the overall federal law, which is that militias can't self-activate. So if you are a group of people with guns, and even if you have a uniform and you know, have practice drills or whatever, if you just show up with your friends and your guns and your uniforms, that doesn't make you a legal militia. The only people who can call up a legal militia are the state government or the federal government. You know, other than the National Guard, I do not believe that there is a modern instance of a militia being called up. So these are these groups that identify as militias are not legal entities.
Okay. So why do they get to show up at these protests? Why do they get to show up in ways that are praised by people like Trump and other conservatives? Like, I don't understand how they are allowed to just roam around.
So they are allowed to show up just like other people are allowed to show up if they have, depending on the gun laws in the state, like Virginia has open carry laws, other states do too. They are allowed as individuals to walk around. Is that a good idea? No. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say no, it's not a good idea.
It's a
but
terrible
if they start to act as law enforcement, if they take that role on, or law enforcement, if they take on the role of claiming that they are protecting something, they are patrolling something, that is not legal. So they cannot take on authority. Can they show up like any other person is allowed to show up? Yes. Can they have a gun? It depends on the state's gun laws. Can they act as a law enforcement or other sort of authority? No. Now that, you know, the thing that's on a lot of people's minds right now is voter intimidation, right? So voter intimidation is not legal in any form. There's no form of voter intimidation that is legal. And so if they are showing up and they're, you know, carrying weapons or otherwise being intimidating, that is not okay. And that can be reported as a crime. Either to the state, to the election office, to the district attorney. A lot of people are saying that it's not a great idea to call the police unless it's truly an emergency, because that can escalate things as well. But if you call the election office, they will know how to deal with that. Election Land, ProPublica, and a couple of other places are also creating resources for people to report voter intimidation, among other things. And I can, here, I'll put that link.
All right.
I'll put that link in the chat, because I don't know where else to put it.
Okay, so I just want to kind of get straight to the biggest fear that we have, that it's not just voter intimidation that we're afraid of. We're afraid of a violent standoff during or after the election. And that it could really start to feel like civil war or Oklahoma bombing, you know, all over the country, you know, just crazy domestic terrorism. And so like way beyond voter intimidation, like that's
yeah. So I think a lot of people
yeah.
are worried about that. I think one of the things that it is incumbent on us to do is to not sort of escalate that idea, not to escalate that idea in a way that gets people even more fired up. I also think it is really a good idea. One of the things, one of the rumor reality cards we have is, when is election day? Election day is now, right? Election day is actually election deadline. That's the last time you can vote. Most people in the country can vote as of today. And in fact, more than 17 million people have voted so far in this election. And that's record breaking for early voting. So vote today. Like, vote as soon as you can. Second, one of the things we need to understand is, what should this election look like? Because we live in the United States and democracy has been very stable for a very long time, and elections have never been so hot and contested. Elections are generally peaceful civic events, right? We've never really spent a lot of time educating ourselves on the true mechanics of an election, right? So in this election, there's this long voting period, right? 3-4 weeks of voting, depending on the state, more for mail-in ballots. And the deadline for voting is, of course, November 3rd. However, that is the beginning of ballot counting. So in at least 10 states, I need to go back and look at this, and we have a card on this too. In at least 10 states, they can't count mailed ballots until election day. And a few of those states are swing states. I think Wisconsin might be one of them.
Yeah, it's actually Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So counting a mail-in ballot takes time, right? It's a manual process. They need to check that it's valid in a lot of different ways. In Pennsylvania, of course, you need to have both your envelopes, no naked ballots. They need to be signed. In some states, they need to be witnessed. So they need to be authorized and verified by hand and then counted. This takes time. It would be extremely normal and to be expected that in these states, you will not see a winner declared immediately. And that is because they haven't counted the ballots yet. So
yeah,
people understanding that. is
Your
really
car,
important.
yeah, on your card it says counting ballots will take longer this year because officials expect up to 35% of voters will use mail-in ballots. That's
Right.
interesting. 35%.
It's a
Many
huge
of
number. It's much bigger than ever before on a national basis.
many of these will be mailed on election day. Of people who are casting the ballots. Each one needs to be opened by hand and validated by hand. Provisional ballots, which are cast when someone doesn't have a current state ID, also need to be checked by hand. Yeah.
So provisional ballots, there are a lot of reasons for casting a provisional ballot, but they also need to be verified. And because of the high volume in the past, there were far fewer ballots that had to be counted by hand from election day forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the vast, vast, vast majority of votes were already counted by the time the polls closed. So you could meaningfully call the election for one candidate or another in most states that night because, 98% of the ballots would have been counted. In this year, unlike in prior years, you could have a situation where only 60, 70% of the ballots have been counted, and that's not enough, or it might not be enough to call the race, depending on how close it is. That might seem weird to people because we're not used to that, but the mail-in ballots themselves just extend the process of counting. So if a state isn't called on election night, that is not a crisis. That's actually what's supposed to happen. So one of the ways we avoid panic, right, is to make sure that everybody understands how it's supposed to work. If the election is very close, there probably will be a variety of challenges to the election, but it might not be close, right? If it's a landslide, those challenges are going to be much harder to pursue, right? In terms of concerns on election day itself, the right people are thinking about those problems. And I think people should feel somewhat confident that the right people are thinking about those problems. Law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, I see your point. I see your point about not getting and not escalating the concerns about what could happen post-election. And I see why, you think that that's important. But at the same time, I also feel like we need to be prepared for different scenarios after the election. And people who have done sort of war games, like going through various scenarios, are really concerned. Are really concerned about like what is kind of part of what would be a tool for us if Trump does contest this election, and he refuses to leave. Like, what could we do about that? I mean, and so like, reading about that, and it was a bipartisan group. I think that's kind of what got me seriously concerned, and I'm sure that it's got many others very seriously concerned. I mean, do you feel like they've done some sort of disservice, or do you agree with that analysis, or like what's your take on that?
You know me, I am fairly paranoid. And I actually started getting worried about this scenario, in January. And I actually, for reasons, have a lot of friends in the national security space. And I have been worried about this for a long time. Having said that, and I still worry about it to a certain extent, I have become convinced that certain scenarios are more likely than others. And the fact that all this analysis has been done, I assure you, we're not the only people reading those analyses, right? So am I nervous about it? Yes. Am I completely freaked out about it? less than I used to be. And that's for a few reasons. One is it does not look like the election is going to be that close. I will be, if the polls tighten up and get very, very tight, I will be more concerned about it. Number two is the amount of early voting. Number three is the fact that other people who are equipped to prepare for those sorts of situations have also read these analyses. And last, I think Trump is likely to contest the election. I do not think that he's really going to want to go down in a blaze of glory. I think that's a less likely scenario than I used to. And there's a variety of reasons for that. He would need a lot of cooperation for that to actually work. And I don't think he's going to get that kind of cooperation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So am I worried about it? Yes. I would be lying if I said I wasn't worried about it, but I am actually less freaked out about it than I once was. And the way, the things that we can do as individuals to make it less likely
Mm-hmm.
is to, not, do what we can to cool things down.
Mm-hmm.
B, vote early. And C, one of the key things that's going to happen, and the thing that I expect to happen, is that there will be real or imagined crises that happen on or near election day or thereafter. We're really going to have to depend on people to, to do what our friend last week said, wow, wait, what, right? If you see a headline or you see news that either enrages you, terrifies you, or confirms your what you most thought must be secretly true, stop.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is because that emotion is what disinformation is manipulating you to do. Right? It doesn't mean it's not true, but it does mean that you should be very careful, because the people who want to manipulate you, they want to, that's what they want, that they want that rise out of you. So when
Mm-hmm.
you feel that rise, stop. Say, I need to make sure this is true before I do anything about it. So look to see where that information is coming from. Look to see if it's confirmed in multiple places. If you are not confident that you can tell the difference between a credible and a not credible source, you're welcome to look on our credible sources page, where we have third-party objective ratings of what is a credible source, or ask someone that you trust.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of people, good, careful, thorough, objective people digging in to look at, where is this information coming from? No matter what the circumstance is,
Mm-hmm.
panicking is not going to help. Preparation will.
Yeah, exactly. So then my question is, because I don't feel like I'm unjustly panicking. I really want to figure out how to be prepared. And I don't really see a plan, like a step-by-step plan of when, what we're supposed to be doing if it happens, because that's what happened in 2000. Like, none of us were prepared.
Well, in 2000,
Yeah.
we didn't have a problem of violence. We had a problem of strange legal crisis rather than an actual, there was, so depending on what you're actually worried about. And I think this is fair. I think that, the idea that we should create a plan and give people advice as to how to plan for this, I think that's a valid thing.
Well, we don't have to dwell on it right now. I mean, I didn't mean to derail us, from talking about other things. I just wanted to kind of point out that for me, like it is a very serious concern, and that I personally have tried to come up with like what would happen, you know,
Well,
if we are in that situation.
why don't we grab someone who is probably better qualified to talk through that, and
Uh-huh.
bring that person into this conversation like next week or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. Why don't we? Yeah. I think that's a really,
We
really
can
good
do that.
idea. Yeah.
But in the meantime, you know, one of the things that you can definitely do is vote early. Absolutely vote, no matter who you are. If you live in California and you think my vote doesn't matter because, you know, it's a blue state, or you live in Kentucky and you think your vote doesn't matter because it's a red state, your vote absolutely matters. Definitely vote. And stay informed, and stay informed with credible sources, right? Don't let yourself get sucked into the emotional tide,
Right.
because that will definitely not help.
Yeah.
We'll talk about what we can do to help, but getting swept up in the emotion of what's going to happen is definitely not going to help. And you're gonna, you know, we're gonna have to help each other stay cool.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting challenge. I mean, I am very, very focused on you know, working on getting people out to vote with the 100 Voters Project, and also creating like these videos, like teaching people how to vote by mail in Pennsylvania, because that's where I am. So we created these like animated videos, like explaining to people exactly what they need to do to have their ballots count.
And it's great because you've translated that into a bunch of different languages as well.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And we're actually targeting voters in language right now on Facebook, which is really cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah, did you know there were 440,000 Spanish speaking left leaning voters in Pennsylvania?
I did not know that.
That's
But did
crazy.
you know that we have cards in Spanish?
Oh, nice. Yeah.
We
So I
only have
hope
3
you're,
of them right now, but if people like them, we can create more.
yeah, I hope you get them out to Pennsylvania and Florida and, you know, other battleground states. But I think in language outreach is really important, because a lot of disinformation, in fact, they are just rampant in places like WhatsApp and WeChat, where there are a lot of Chinese Americans. And you know, WhatsApp
TikTok.
is very popular with Latino voters. And so it's like way beyond Facebook. I mean, people are just being inundated with crazy misinformation. And so, you know, I just really I think it's so important that we do work in multiple languages, because we're multi-linguistic in this country. I mean, we have so many languages being spoken, and many of them have limited English proficiency. Like for Asian Americans, it's about, you know, 40%. 40% of Asian Americans in this country have limited English proficiency, you know? And so, you know, we got it. And for Latinos, it's even higher than that. I think it's like 47%. So it's like we've got to really figure out how to reach millions of people in their language, because right now they're just kind of being left on their own. And it's to me, it's a very serious problem. Disinformation is probably worse in those communities than many other communities, you know.
I think the idea that we've sort of really focused on is this idea of changing the ratio of garbage to good. Right?
Yeah.
Those people who for malicious reasons wish to spread disinformation, and those people who just get caught up in it and spread it kind of accidentally. The result of that is that the information space, you know, people's feeds, what they're looking at, is so full of disinformation that you start to think, well, it must be true, right?
Right.
Simply changing the ratio and pushing out valid, helpful, credible information is one of the most effective things we can do. There's some really interesting studies that have been published recently that show most people really don't want to spread disinformation, right? They do it because they get confused, maybe because they're a little careless, or because, you know, they just don't have the tools to tell one from the other. One of the smartest people I know, who I respect very highly, just posted something on Facebook yesterday, a mentor of mine, that was based on a disinformation source. And I was really shocked. And I went to her and I said, like, what is going on here? And she said, well, look, it has these sorts of people involved, and it had this and that and the other. It looked real to me. In this information environment, everyone gets confused. So if we can change the ratio of good to garbage in English, in Spanish, in these Asian languages that you've talked about, that has a real impact on people. It helps people realize that disinformation isn't the only information out there. It helps keep them from getting confused. So that's, you know, that's what you're doing with your videos and making sure that they're translated in language. It's something that ordinary, everyday people can do. If you're going to be online and you're going to be sharing, share the good stuff, right? Take a little bit of extra time to make sure that what you've got is the good stuff. So, you know, those of us like Annabel and myself, and many, many, many other people who spend obsessive amount of time looking for good information and rooting out disinformation. We are happy to share that. We try very hard to share it widely. If you can support us by amplifying those efforts, that's great. There are many, many other great organizations pushing really solid information. PolitiFact is one that I think is, you know, very, very credible and helpful. Anything by Pointer or ProPublica. Most, we're about to put a page up on our site that lists more of these sort of fact-checking sites. When you see disinformation, instead of sharing it or commenting on it, which just brings more attention to it, brings more algorithmic amplification to it, instead of responding to it, go find the truth and share that. That's part of this wait, what, wow, sorry, I got that wrong. Wow, wait, what process? So when you see something that either gets you very upset or you think is a little fishy, like this whole laptop thing, it's fishy, really, really fishy. Instead of sharing that or commenting on it or saying, that's not true, just go find out what is true and share that.
You know what I have trouble with is that there's so much disinformation. I don't know which ones I should bother to try to counter. You know, like which ones are really dangerous, like the whole laptop thing. I mean, Hunter Biden thing. I mean, there's just so much stuff. Bin Laden, like I don't even want to talk about it. But I feel the responsibility to try to counter it. Like, you know, but how do you filter out? Like when you create cards, how do you filter out like what's worth even talking about?
Well, we sort of have a three-pronged test there. We have some partners, the CTI League and CogSec Collab, who monitor the spread of disinformation. So they look at where it's coming from. They look at how quickly it's spreading through the information sphere, and they share it with us. So we look at those things. We sometimes see stuff on the horizon, but if it hasn't broken through into the mainstream, we wait. So we do the research on it, but we don't want to amplify that stuff any more than it's already been amplified. So we wait. We hope we never have to use it. So that's one stream we have. The other stream we have is if something gets mentioned by a very high profile character, a presidential candidate, say, and by the way, we are a 501c3. We do not endorse any particular view. Our goal is to say, okay, what's true and what's not. That's tricky now because, of course, reality has been politicized, but we do make an effort. So when we see something coming out of a presidential candidate's mouth, maybe not the first time they say it, but maybe the second or third time they say it, that's sort of a trigger point for us. And the third one is not very scientific. The third one is if it comes out of my kids' mouths, or one of my relatives' mouths, or one of my friends' mouths, or, we're a team of about 10 people. So, when things break through and we hear them coming out of the mouths of people who are not particularly ideological, and it's clearly a matter of confusion, we know that that is an issue. Look, if you're super on the end of one part of the political spectrum or another, you don't necessarily care if it's true or not. And our little explanations aren't going to change your mind, right? It's those issues that are getting enough noise in the mainstream that they're confusing ordinary people. That's what we're trying to focus on. So we're trying to make that, that's essentially the three things. We have actual technical people out there monitoring spread of disinformation. We have, we monitor what the President, Biden, other very high profile people are saying. And we look around us to our communities and see what pretty normal people are saying. And when we see that they're confused,
Right.
that gets our attention.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, I feel like I love talking to you. I could talk to you for hours and hours. I would love to, I mean, I don't understand. And this is like for future episodes. Like, I don't really understand how to stay calm and sane when there's so much like threatening this election, and it has a lot to do with like, I don't know what we're supposed to do when terrible things happen, when people show up with guns, when there might be violent standoffs. Like, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to share with you a story. Okay, this is the reason why I'm so freaked out about violence. I was in North Carolina in 2016, doing a combination of like interviewing voters and also door knocking for Hillary. And two things I noticed. One was that the Hillary campaign, I think they just kind of assumed that it was in the bag. Even in North Carolina, they're like, we got this. Like, that's what the campaign person actually said to me when I was like in a panic trying to run around door knocking. And he's like, calm down, we got this. Like, we're going to win. I know this. The numbers are there. The other thing is, I talked to the Republican chairman of one of the counties in like the mountains, and he said to me, if Trump loses and Hillary wins, they're ready for a civil war. And this guy's like the chair of the Republican Party. Okay. And I was like, really? Like, you mean with guns? And he's like, yeah, whatever it takes. And sure enough, they scheduled, I saw a flyer, they scheduled a so-called gun training on election day. Okay. And so I mean, I was petrified. I don't know if he said that to just scare me, but I do feel like there's like an underground, like militia types, like
So,
constantly
so, so we definitely
preparing.
know that those people
Uh-huh.
exist, and we know that they are being encouraged in some ways. Um, and I think it makes sense to have concerns here, and I think it
Mm,
makes sense to um, talk to people who understand what's happening in the background on this. The people I've spoken to have gone through a couple of scenarios on this regarding how many people would actually be willing to get
mhm,
involved, what it would actually take, um, that sort of thing. I do think people should be vigilant. I do think
mhm.
being concerned is real. Um,
Yeah.
so let's step back to the primary issue, right? How do
Wait,
you
wait a
stay
second.
calm?
Let me just interrupt with some comments from the thread.
Sure. Okay.
There are a lot of critical comments, presumably from Trump supporters on the live stream, and
Okay.
people saying things like Joe Biden caught in yet another lie. I'm not a Trump supporter, but today's New York Post article about Hunter Biden's emails on his computer linking him to Ukraine are true. Read the article and listen to the interview. It is not
They aren't.
false. Yeah.
So
Um,
there's so much bonkers about that. There's so many holes in that story. I would, you really need to be extremely skeptical of what's going on there. I, you know, I wasn't there, but I've seen enough of the story. I've seen enough very good analysts take apart the bits of that story. That story is extremely, extremely fishy, and
mhm,
I wouldn't. It, other stuff, sure. Does Biden occasionally say things that are exaggerated or not true? Sure, absolutely. There's, PolitiFact, in fact, went and did a
mhm.
side by side on the debate and debunked both. Uh, don't get your head in a twist over the laptop. It's Russian disinformation being funneled and
Right.
astroturfed through Giuliani. Don't do it.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I mean, I certainly feel like that's, you're right about that. But I guess where do you go? Where do you go to initially like figure out if it's
So
true or
that's a really
false?
good question. So what was interesting about it is that I saw that show up and I said, oh, here we go. It's going to be really weird.
Mhm,
And the first thing I noticed was that for about the first 12 hours,
mhm.
uh, no major news outlets other than the Post had published on this.
Uh-huh.
And I said, I understand why that is. They're checking. They're
Mhm,
trying to figure out what's going on. So, my team and I looked at that and said, okay, hold. Don't amplify it. Don't share it. Don't do anything. Let's wait until some people who are smarter than we are have gone in and looked at that.
mhm,
The second thing is that there are a couple of people who study disinformation, in this case, Thomas Rid, who did a very interesting analysis of the first information that came out.
mhm,
He actually looked at the PDF files that the metadata on the PDF files that these emails were supposedly published in, and found that metadata that talked about dates and who created these files, et cetera, could not line up with the story that was being told about how and when and where these files came from.
Right.
That's a pretty big red flag. Third of all, we've seen for over a year that Giuliani has been pursuing this sort of stuff with disreputable people. So we knew that this was coming, right? So as I did, I said, wow, and then I said, wait, right? Nobody move until we actually know what this beast is. Then I waited for a variety of different people to analyze it, and people who are not particularly left-wing, right-wing. Then as those stories started to come in, Giuliani started changing his statements about describing what happened. And so then there was all this sort of weird and conflicting information coming out. So that cluster of information made me extremely skeptical. And then I said, okay, now we can say with a fair bit of confidence that, there may or may not be some elements in here, but the story as a whole is extremely suspect, and nothing should be taken for granted until, very serious analysis has been done on this.
Right. Yeah. Okay. No, that's helpful. I mean, you do always manage to calm me down. So, and I don't feel so helpless because I've been avoiding reading the news lately because every time I read it, like my blood pressure would go up. But
So
why don't we do this? Yeah, go ahead. You want to finish?
I think the key issue here is that what we're seeing now is overwhelming.
Yes.
Right? There's an overwhelming number of crises. There's an overwhelming amount of news, and that feeling of being overwhelmed is the enemy.
Yes,
that is the enemy.
Yes, I know that. I know that too, and I still let it happen to me.
Of course you do, because you're human.
Yeah,
it's a very human response. It is not a human failing. It is just the act of being human.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But
maybe
we have to keep each other. We have to remember. We have to teach ourselves the skill that we didn't really need before, right?
Yeah. I've just never felt this way before, where I just couldn't. I just feel attacked all the time. I feel attacked, and it's getting to like my head. Like they're attacking my brain. It's not a physical attack. It's like an assault on my brain, because they're just bombarding us with all this disinformation and people saying crazy things. And most of my friends are pretty sane. They're pretty grounded, but I still get people saying crazy things. And then it makes me, I don't even know if there should be a word for it, like the reaction that you get, like almost like hot flashes or something. The reaction you get when you hear somebody you respect and care about say crazy things. There should be a
Yes,
word.
You should have seen me go off on my friend the other day.
I don't know what to call it.
So, but understand that the people who are promoting disinformation know this. And that's what they've taught themselves to be good at getting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's because that's the advantage for them, right?
Right.
When you're freaked out, when I'm freaked out, when people are freaked out, they're not going to make good decisions.
Yeah.
And being freaked out is the most normal thing right now. So if you feel freaked out, you should feel in good company. Nearly everybody is freaked out right now. But we kind of have to have a buddy system, right? We got to help each other.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's interesting is that if you read the comments on the thread right now, there was like one guy just dropping a lot of misinformation, right? And it was attracting other people with a lot of disinformation. And then this guy shows up named Jean-Pierre. Thank you, Jean-Pierre, who's like dropping one fact after another. Thank you, Jean-Pierre. Like really informative stuff. And I think that's kind of what we need. We need the Jean-Pierres of the world to like just calmly drop facts into crazy threads, because it was getting so crazy I didn't even want to respond to it. But anyway, so that's how we restore sanity.
So it's changing the ratio, right? So I wouldn't try to drop. So I can't see the thread because I'm not smart enough to figure out how to do that all at the same time. But instead of trying to rebut each piece of information, which will take your blood pressure up into the stratosphere, just push out good information, any good information, just change the ratio. And we can all do this. You may not know how to rebut a certain argument, but you can go find a piece of information on how to vote, right?
Yeah.
You can go find a piece of information on global warming or immigration or any of the issues that you care about. Go find the most credible, well-researched, well-explained versions of those things. Go to your favorite sources. We'd like to be one of your favorite sources, but there are many of them out there. Go to your favorite source. Find good, valid, reasonable, calm information and share it. Change the ratio of garbage to good. Do not engage with the garbage because that's what gets it elevated.
Yeah.
Just
you know what?
Just change the ratio.
You know what I would love, and I know this is a lot of work for your team, but like I would love to post something every morning, like so it's like some dose of reality with your coffee, just like just consider this, and it just kind of gives something to think about in the morning.
We post new cards 2 or 3 times a week up on our site, and we push new cards onto our page, reality team page, every day. And we can put them on your page on the Talk on Main Street as well. No problem.
Yeah, that would be really great if you would. And then just we just try to get it circulating. But thank you so much, Deb. I love what you do. Really appreciate it.
And I really appreciate how you're just sort of getting out there, taking that energy and doing stuff with it, doing constructive work. Helping people to understand how to vote, helping people understand how elections work. That's the work that matters.
It does, yeah. And I am going to survive this. We're going to survive this.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely, yes.
Well, big hugs. Thank you, Deb. Have a good evening. Enjoy it. Have a glass of wine on me.
Oh, yes. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.